do it the right way. We're going to hang out. And they can always come by and say hi because we're friendly. And
Yeah.
yeah, and they have good volunteers down there. They have good organizers and volunteers down there. They really do know what they're doing. But again, they've been doing it for decades. And, they have quite a few people ponying up not only, all sorts of resources, time,
yeah.
money, hours.
I'd like to maybe even be able to meet and spend a little time with some of the folks who run the thing and get some ideas about how stuff works, because I have no clue.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea at all. Might be able to put you in touch with some people. So
That would be good.
yeah.
I'd enjoy that.
All right. So yeah, Tucson Festival of Books is coming. I just got my dates for the Renaissance Festival this year, so I will be at the Renaissance Festival April 1st and 2nd this year. So that's the final weekend of the festival this year. It's running over into April. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm hoping the weather is beautiful and that lots and lots of people will come out to see me. It was a great event for me last year, so I'm hoping that this year is the
good.
same. Yeah, I get to dress up and
Play
and be in character, and if I'm nothing if not a character. So.
Yes, you do well with that. So what are you reading?
So I just have to say, I have to put this out there. So in 2022, according to Goodreads, and I tracked all my books this year. I was really, really cognizant and really thoughtful about making sure I tracked all my books this year. Of the books that I completed, that I read, 90 books. Now, I admit 24 of those were picture books, which I do read picture books because I coach picture books. But my average length per book was right around 251 pages per book. So 90 books last year. So I realized one of the reasons that when we do our updates, why I'm like, oh, I read all this and I read that. And not only that, but I have to look them up is because I read so many books. It's hard to keep track sometimes of all the books. But so the book that I'm reading right now, believe it or not, is Another Country by James Baldwin, which, because I never read it.
Yeah.
And I was like, somehow it popped up in my feed and I was like, hey, I've never read this. I'm going to read this. So I'll let you know how that goes. One of my strategies for this year is not, and I'm not necessarily looking to beat that number. The year before that, I read like 87 books. The year before that was like 86. I always set a goal of about 50 because I just don't know, right? But my strategy for this year is that for every 2 library books, I have to read one of the ones that I've bought and have set on the shelf and haven't read yet. And so I just finished a book called Giving Up the Ghost that I acquired in 2007 by Sheri Sinykin, and it's a lovely little middle grade ghost story. And it deals with death and dying. It handles it in a solid way. I had a little trouble with some of the character motivation and internal thinking at a couple of points in the book, but the way that it handled the hospice care and the aspect of dying and death was handled really well. So that's one that I just finished, and I kind of hedged a little bit because I knew that I didn't want to read like 93 books last year, so I actually had a couple that I was reading at the same time and didn't quite finish until after the first of the year because that's how I planned it.
That's just how you roll.
Yeah, so I just finished a book called Range by David Epstein. And the subtitle on it is Why Generalists Trump in a Specialized World, or Triumph in a Specialized World. It's fascinating. It was very validating for me because I'm kind of a Jane of all. Yeah, I'm a generalist. I've done all these things, right? And it's not saying that specialists aren't important, but what it's saying is that we've become so specialized that sometimes specialists are so dug into their niche that they can't think outside of
Right.
it. And so sometimes it takes an outsider to come in and solve the problem. Which, by the way, there are actually websites out there, like there's one called Innocentive, where actually what they do is they post problems that they can't solve at certain laboratories or think
Right,
tanks.
right.
And anybody can come up with a solution. And if you come up with a really good solution, they will pay you 20, 30, 50 grand for this solution. And they do it because they're crowdsourcing solutions outside of the arena of their area of focus when they find that they just can't solve a problem
So-
within their area of focus.
It's interesting. My daughter-in-law just got a master's in a subject that I was like, what is that? And it's project communications.
So she's the
So,
go-between
and this
for-
is kind of exactly the kind of projects that she was working on, where they would come in. Now, they meaning her class would be presented with a scenario from competing specialists in like farm and medicine, and now we have to integrate this and solve this dilemma and make this system work.
It's
So
fascinating.
it's very much like that. And now her new job is going to be doing that for things like that as a project manager for a big, I think it's Caremark or one of the big pharmacy distribution centers. And they're having difficulties with coordinating their distribution with Medicare rules, because Medicare rules and prices vary from region to region, and they ship nationwide.
Right.
And so they have a lot of trouble coordinating their price structures with the various regions and the various different
Interesting.
rules and
Yeah.
subgroups and the Medicare Advantage plans that are all different. And so her job is going to be to try to weave this into a
And
coherent...
find a solution.
Yeah.
Well, this is a really fascinating book. I highly recommend it just for the science that he digs into and how some of these folks that are in these trenches don't quite have the ability. They're so focused and they're so niched in that it's hard for them to look over the trench at what's going on out beside them. And some of these simple solutions that people have come up with to help solve their
Put
problems.
right-handed people on the right-hand side of the line and left-handed people on the left-hand side
Right,
of the
that
line.
kind of thing. Yeah, you're having problems keeping this glop that you're trying to get through these filters from, sticking to them. Well, why don't you use what they do in the concrete industry and get a little vibrator that keeps it from glomming together? A guy got $20,000 for that. It's like, okay.
Sure, why not?
So I'm thinking anybody out there who is one of those people who's a very big, who's done a lot of things and very much a generalist might want to go to these websites and see if there's a problem.
Would be interesting.
That you could just mull over, because that's how these guys do it. They just like stick it in their brain, or they have conversations with their friends, and sometimes they crowdsource it. They actually have groups of people who group up on these problems to find solutions. It's fascinating. Anyway, I found it very fascinating. And the other really good book that I read was The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Gross. And I really, really, really enjoyed that. That one, I'm looking forward to reading the next book in that series.
I've not read it, but I am aware of it, and it's on the radar.
So good. I have to tell you, it's somewhat meta. So there's this whole aspect where in the book you're reading it, and then all of a sudden there's a conversation between the characters. Well, why don't you just write this part if you don't like what I'm saying, right? That kind of. So there's a bit of a meta aspect to it, on top of the fact that they've taken all these characters from all of these Gothic type novels and kind of mashed them up, and it's done really well, and very feminist take on all of these horror stories and Sherlock Holmes and all of that. So I highly recommend. Highly recommend.
I'll have to look it up. My reading has ranged from silly to fairly intense crime stuff, like I like to read, to some really serious sociology.
Oh.
Yeah, The Politics of Envy
Ah.
by Henry Sienkiewicz.
Okay.
It's dense, it's deep, and it explains so much about how politics works these days.
Yeah, that probably does. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's almost depressing how well it